The Unfaithful Steward, a sermon by the Reverend Donald Macdonald of the Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland. Luke 16:1-2. And he said also unto his disciples, There was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him and said unto him, How is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest no longer be steward. This rich man had a steward to whom he entrusted his property, that he might keep it from robbers and increase it. He heard that the steward was wasting his goods. Had he continued faithful, oh, what pleasure his master would have had in him! What happiness also the steward would have had when the accounts were made up, and how gladly would his master have promoted him to a higher position. But alas, he proved unfaithful. God is our master, and we are his stewards. The property over which he has set us is our souls and bodies. Our chief end is to glorify and enjoy God. God has given us youth and mental powers, reason, will, and judgment, that we might choose the good and reject the evil. He has given a revelation of his will in his word. He has given a law, the 10 Commandments, as a wall to defend his glory and to keep us from sinning and from hell. It is in our nature through original sin to break that law. He has given us gospel ordinances to take care of the property over which he has made us stewards. Youth is the time to begin to take care of the soul, God's property. If you indulge in sin, gratifying your lusts, you show yourself an unfaithful steward to God, dishonoring him and destroying your own soul. It is easier to follow God in youth than in old age. In youth the heart and affections are more tender, like young branches which can be easily bent. But let them grow for years, and it is almost impossible to bend or uproot them. Young persons have the promise that if they seek God early, they shall find him. Proverbs 8:17. We read of young men in the scriptures that began to follow God, such as Abel, who offered a better sacrifice than Cain. He was a good steward. We read of Samuel, who began early to serve God, though yet ignorant of him. He put himself in God's way, and God called him. 1 Samuel 3:10. Timothy and Titus gave themselves early to the Lord and proved to be good stewards. They gave their souls to God and also their bodies to his service. We read of other young men in the scriptures that gave their youth to sin and Satan. They destroyed God's property, grieving his spirit and ruining their souls. Cain is an example, who grudgingly and through unbelief offered an unacceptable sacrifice to God, and afterwards slew his brother. We see what privileges Absalom had, yet he spent his youth forming plans to wrest the kingdom from his father and to kill him, breaking the 5th commandment. We see the case of the band of children that mocked the prophet Elisha. They were cursed and killed by she-bears. Whatever seed you sow in youth, that seed you shall reap in old age. If you spend your youth sinning against God and rejecting his Son, remember you shall not be long a steward of youth. Old age will soon creep upon you, with all its accompanying pains and weaknesses. You will then exclaim, Oh, that I could commence youth over again! How differently would I spend it! Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Ecclesiastes 11:9. You shall not be long a steward of health. There are many sick that would give worlds for health, crying through intense pain. When they had health, they spent it, careless of their soul's interests, in the service of Satan. God made us stewards of precious time. The most of people are busy, seeking to provide food and raiment. Few make use of time to close with Jesus Christ in the gospel. Many spend their time making riches that shall be taken from them at death, and spending it upon their lusts while they live. Others spend their time at dancing, balls, and theatres, neglecting gospel ordinances. But as they abuse their time, God sometimes removes them by sudden deaths from their balls and their theatres. In the midst of their sport, when the drinking cup is in their hand, they die. There are many young men and women who have good reason to weep and be ashamed of the way they spend their youth, health, and time. Unless such in this congregation repent of their sins, the account they shall have to give to God will be a sad one, accompanied with shame, confusion, and eternal damnation. If you continue in sin and indifferent about the severity of its punishment, you shall experience the intolerable pains of hell, and shall find out then that it was an awful thing to have spent youth, health, and time sinning against God, so as to expose you to such eternal and unchangeable torments. Many young men have acquired great learning and obtained high offices, such as membership of Parliament, but have turned all their cultivated powers against God's cause. Like Saul of Tarsus, they employ the weapons of their education to crush the cause of Christ. Others fill offices in the visible church, and even there become inveterate enemies to God and his people. They climbed over the wall and did not come in by the door of regeneration. Christ calls them thieves and robbers. They will not be long stewards. God shall remove them by death. After giving an account of their unfaithful stewardship, they shall fall not merely into a ditch, but into a lake, burning with fire and brimstone. Kings and rulers must give an account of their stewardship, even such as afflict their subjects with cruel laws, and harass and perplex the poor, and grind their faces. God summons them by death to give an account, dethrones them and wrests their kingdoms from them, as he did to Ahab and Jezebel and Pharaoh. God did this in our own land, when the cause of Christ was persecuted by the Steward family, and every unlawful means used to introduce popery and episcopacy. Mary, Queen of Scots, a great enemy of the truth, was beheaded, as was also her grandson, Charles I, while his son, James II, had to flee to France and died in exile without authority or kingdom. You cannot be long a steward of temporal mercies. You must give an account to God of the use you make of the money he gave you. Every penny you spend in folly shall then be dear to you, because it belongs to God. You deliberately grudge to support the cause of Christ with your means, although strictly commanded by God himself. You shall soon require to give an account of the cold treatment you have given to his cause. Some shut their hearts against it, and, it is to be feared, persuade others to do so also. If the love of God were kindled in your heart, you would have the spirit of the poor widow Christ commended for her liberality. She cast all she had into the treasury of the Lord. But you, children of God, are stewards over the cause of Christ, wishing to do what you can to promote it by your efforts and example. You are like people that commenced with a small capital and have acquired great riches, trading with heaven through faith. When people get rich in the world, they get titles. God gives his people the titles of kings and priests. The account they give of their stewardship shall be pleasing to God. They shall be brought into glory, removed from sorrows, trials, and imperfections, and shall become perfectly blessed in the full enjoyment of God to all eternity.